my name's Taryn and welcome to my presentation on how to be a good, authentic HASS teacher. Thank you to Sheila, Leigh, Kelby and Shona for listening to my presentation. So I just want to start off and talk about what an authentic teacher means to me. So it appears that the most effective humanities and social sciences teaching is one that incorporates an authentic element to a critical-based approach to teaching. Here I'm creating lessons and activities that are related and can be used in the students' real lives. These sorts of activities can involve the history and culture of their families as they plot their family tree or finding out the climate of their city or state. A critical angle means that the students are regularly evaluating resources and information and making their own judgments on what they have found. They're not passive in their learning, but are constantly questioning and challenging the information that they have gathered. My role is to facilitate that learning and allow the students to be proactive in their studies. By giving the students a questioning or a problem-posing approach to teaching, students are able to critique what they know and learn from the information collecting, but also begin to question other students and have open discussions on their personal views, which encourages collaboration and student participation. By enabling this, students are able to see past their prejudice, bias or stereotypes that may have been played out in the school and classroom by having open discussions which enables the students to see through the eyes of their peers. With this style of teaching, I'm not simply depositing information to the students are researching and finding their own answers to the questions that they have posed. The educator needs to allow students to make their own decisions on their worldviews. The teacher should not simply transfer knowledge from themselves onto the students, but they should be generating independent talk and discussions between the students and therefore can form their own judgments through debates and transference of one's own opinions and that of others. So what it means for me to be an effective HASS teacher. So the aim of being an effective HASS teacher is to begin mapping and empowering a democratic approach to the humanities and social sciences in the classroom. I need to teach the social environment and people as social beings and investigate their interactions and relationships with the natural and social environment in current historical times. Not only are students learning about the three content strands, which is history, geography, and civics and citizenship, students are learning how to think critically and make sense of their everyday lives and how it relates to the wider world throughout time. So there have long been conflicting ideas on how best to bring social studies into the classroom without the educator influencing the students with their personal views of the subject. It's important for me to have an in-depth understanding towards the resources that I'm giving the students and what they're using, and also offer a range of resources so that students are able to form their own understanding of the subject. For example, Evans explains the notion that depending on the range of resources offered, students may only be learning about a single approach, but there are different ideas with different resources that can be used, and so they hold specific and potentially outdated ideas. A resource needs to be reviewed so that the educator and students are informed on whether the resources advocates on a specific approach or whether it's a worldview and has many different thoughts and ideas put into that resources. The educator may also be swayed by their personal views on how best to teach a HASS teacher. So a traditional historian may consider theory in textbooks the most effective way of teaching history, while another teacher may focus their teaching around the curriculum. It's important for me to merge a range of practices into the classroom so students are taught in ways that support the learning and also the subject being taught. So I need to have an inquiry-based approach where students are forming their own ideas from a range of sources and information that they've gathered and analysed. So an effective HASS teacher would bring the interests, backgrounds of the students and current political views into consideration when planning their lessons. This ensures that my lessons are meaningful and focus on the big ideas while being based around the current event and students' personal lives. So my authentic approach means that students are researching and they're learning about ideas that are related to themselves and that can be used in the real world. When this has been achieved, the teacher is an empowering educator. So some strategies for when I start teaching my HASS subjects to my students. So it's important for me to impart knowledge to the students. The educators need to be continuously engaged in the learning experience with the students. I need to engage the learners to be transformative intellectuals by combining the knowledge and also the practice. So this can be done by creating authentic classroom and learning experiences, and the students can use their own backgrounds and beliefs to share with the classroom, and incursions and excursions for the students to see the subject firsthand that they're being taught, and to hear it firsthand, the stories from guest speakers, and they're able to question and critically examine what they're learning to make sure it is an authentic and it relates to their own lives. When students are inquiring, they're taking a larger role in their own learning, where the learning is open-ended and the results are not always foreseeable. Students are exposed to mass media every day in their lives. Therefore, it's important for me to develop critical literacy skills for the students so they're able to critique the information around them, and that I'm also able to encourage them to take things apart and work out what's been said, what's accurate, and what's just hearsay, and what's going on with the information and who it's intended for and what purpose. So we looked a lot in this unit about Irish Shaw's views on how to teach HASS. So I've written a few things about how I can incorporate her views into my classroom. So it's a bit long and wordy in here. So I'm just going to talk through how I can put this into my classroom. So participatory, ensuring that all my students are taking part to make meaning, to carrying out plans and evaluating the results of that plan. Here the students are active in their learning and it encourages achievement. They have a sense of pride and autonomy towards their work, and they can take that into their personal lives. It allows for a high amount of productivity and inclusivity for the students through active and meaningful participation. This can be achieved through small group work, so all students are given an opportunity to perform, through authentic lessons where students have the ability to relate to their work and put it into their own lives. So I'll just talk about effective next. As the act of receiving and responding to the information that's been gathered and analysed. So in my classroom, students will be able to use their own values and beliefs to guide their learning, and they're able to create meaning with an authentic activity, and it relates to themselves. So it's not a passive learning experience. They're learning it through, they're building on what they've already learned, and they're also educating each other. So this can be achieved when I give problem-posing questions. So all students produce different answers that best suit their beliefs and needs and values. So with problem posing, students are able to respond and to analyse problem-posing questions in the classroom, and they can work together for mutual inquiry. These questions allow for research and analysis in order to reach a conclusion that may be different from others within my classroom. It takes away from the banking of education and allows students to socially construct their meaning. I can achieve this by teaching to the interests of the students where possible. There are three elements to problem posing: listening, so what the students' interests are, what they want to learn, and what they've already brought into the classroom in terms of socially constructed knowledge. Their dialogue, so the discussions between the students on how and what they want to learn. And the action, so the creating meaningful and authentic activities that interest the students in the classroom. So I'll just move on to a couple more before we run out of time. So I think researching is really important. So the students are able to gather a wide range of resources to conduct research into the problem-posing questions. The more research used in the classroom, the higher the likelihood that they're able to deconstruct that knowledge and look at information critically to reach an answer. This can be achieved by providing my students with a range of resources, from ICT to guest speakers to excursions to going to museums and just having different ideas and people's perspectives brought into the classroom. So being a democratic teacher and having a democratic classroom is so important for HASS. It's creating the learning with both the educator and the students. So the students have a say in what they learn and they're active participants in the classroom. It decreases the likelihood of deficit thinking and it will empower students to take charge of their learning. So I can achieve this by having open discussions at the start of term or year to find out what the students are interested in and what they want to learn throughout the year. So it's not simply myself being the educator and the students being receptive of my information. It's a two-way street where both the student and the teacher are learning together and finding out new information in a democratic way. Thank you for listening to my talk on how to be an effective HASS teacher.
Good afternoon everyone, and welcome to my presentation on the importance of being an authentic HNSS teacher. I haven't got the poster because my partner Taryn does, and I'm thanking her so much for creating it, but I do have a photo. And I would also like to say thank you to my two friends for coming and listening to me today. Thank you, Glenn and Jess. Okay, so in my opinion, humanities and social science classrooms need to be authentic and have deeper meanings involved within their learning, as well as being consistently engaging. I believe that to be an influencing and wholesome HNSS teacher means to have an authentic lessons and learning planned, which also allows students to think critically of the world around them. Wholesome educators who teach students to adjust their way of attempting a problem or situation are likely to be able to influence the same students into questioning different situations. There are 4 things that support authentic learning, including finding an activity that involves real-world problems, the use of open-ended inquiry, students engaging in discourse and social learning, and students directing their own learning in project work. These 4 things come together to produce lessons that allow students to question everything around them, as well as to make their own decisions and discuss different worldviews. It is important to incorporate the usage of critical thinking within lessons so students can understand different points of view whilst learning to be empathetic to each other's opinions. HNSS is a fantastic subject to teach this, as it is about the world and its events are the major component and are consistently changing. Therefore, students can relate towards it as they are part of it. It is also important to include critical thinking within the lesson as to teach students to think outside of the box and to come up with other solutions or reasons towards problems. It's imperative for students to think critically and outside of the box because the world is looking for innovators and pioneers and people who can change what needs to be changed for the greater good of society. By using authentic lessons in HNSS that also involve critical questioning to provoke thinking outside of the box, we can create students who will be a strength and power to society. These students will have the chance then to become our doctors, scientists, pilots and leaders, for example, to help the world progress over time. As an educator, I would ensure that students are given the time to question their own beliefs as well as those around them. To make this happen, I would allow time for students to discuss amongst themselves, and then as a whole class during each HNSS lesson about the topic at hand. This would generate discussion and bring up any previous knowledge or learning, as well as creating healthy and controlled debates, and push students to think for themselves and believe in their own ideas. For teaching to be memorable and meaningful, it must come from the true self and from a willingness to share their beliefs, values and perceptions. This therefore means that to be a successful HNSS, authentic and critical educator, we must have our own opinions and beliefs, not to force onto students or to create bias, but to show how difference is healthy and normal within society, as well as to allow students to have a basis on where to begin to question. Thank you for listening to our presentation.